Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, where our WeAreSC crew gets together and talks about all things USC football. We have a big show today because we are on the verge of spring practice. We got a lot of new information, and so let me introduce you to the panelists, and we'll jump right in. Eric McKinney is the editor-in-chief of WeAreSC. He's a graduate of USC. He is a guru in all things USC football and recruiting, and is likely to be the person who gives you the best information on this show. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not going to be me. Mark Holkin. Mark Holkin writes just about everything for WeAreSC, including and also has his own podcast. Also does practice reports. He turns out more material than anybody else at WeAreSC. Does a great job doing it. I said that Eric McKinney probably is going to give us the best information. I stand by that. But Mark Holkin will be second, and I will pull up third. Mark, I'm sorry I put you in that position already in this show. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to motivate you.
Yeah, it's working.
Good. All right, let's jump into it then. Because spring practice is starting, Lincoln Riley had a press conference yesterday. We got an updated roster for the spring, and so all kinds of new information. So let's just leave it open-ended. Eric McKinney, why don't you start with us? Tell me what jumps out at you from the press conference and the updated roster.
I think there's two things from what Lincoln Riley talked about. The first is kind of his official confirmation, and we've been talking about it at WeAreSC for a while, that the Jonah Monheim is going to slide in from left tackle and play center for USC. And this is something that's been building kind of since the end of last year when he did decide that he was going to come back. It's huge. It's a huge piece of the offensive line that he is back. And then it became, okay, where does he fit best in this group? What's best for him going forward? Lincoln Riley said it was a good sort of career decision for him to come back to play center, to get that kind of under his belt. And that's what we certainly assume that Jonah's feeling too, that it makes him more versatile, more valuable, that he's shown he can snap, and really that he is going to have that sort of inside out knowledge of this offense to be able to run it from that position. And that's big. That's big for Lincoln Riley, for Josh Henson, the offensive line coach, for everybody involved, that you have a guy like that with the knowledge that Jonah Monheim brings back to play center. Now we're going to see what it looks like, him sliding over. I mean, this is not something where he's never snapped before and all of a sudden he's getting thrown in there. I mean, this USC works, 6-7 centers constantly just in terms of snap practice and all of that. So this is not something where he's taken his very first snap here to start spring. But in terms of a position change and that sort of thing, that's the one that jumps out. And then you're going to see kind of what the line looks like around him and how to figure that out. But they want to be really good right up the middle. And we saw last year that when that doesn't work, the whole thing can fall apart pretty quickly. So a lot on Jonah Monheim's shoulders. The second thing that jumped out, not to take everything from it, but the size, right? Lincoln Riley specifically talked about the one group, the defensive line group, and he said, and look, we're not watching the scales. We don't know what they checked in at and what they're actually at now. But what he said was, from the start of kind of winter workouts to now, the defensive line overall has added 340 pounds. And this is a position group that they have talked about consistently since the end of last year. We have got to get bigger up front. And whether that's bringing in bigger guys or adding weight to who's here, clearly that was something where they went out to go do that. And so far looks pretty good. Even the early enrollee freshmen coming in are getting listed at, 20, 25 pounds more than what we had them at as recruits going through the process. So again, everything feels and sounds great the first day of spring, but those are two things I think that jump out where you say, yeah, okay, you build from the inside out, from front to back, talking about offensive and defensive lines. And so that's kind of where you want those right now to be able to bank on when you get spring started.
Mark Holken, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think Eric gave a really good summary of what Coach Riley talked about on Inside the Trojans Huddle, excuse me, Trojans Live radio show yesterday.
We only wish it was on Inside the Trojans Huddle.
Hey, we all have to strive for it, right?
We have a seat for him whenever he's ready.
So Eric, he just talked about the size of the guys. Specifically, if we want to talk about size, it was the specificity of the sizes of the guys across the room. Usually, you see guys checking in at 300, 310, 320. They round it off. These were like right on the numbers. When you see Isaiah Rakes and Bear Alexander, they're both checking in at 313 pounds. Eric, when he talked about the room itself gaining 340 pounds, if you've got 17 guys on campus right now out of 19 defensive linemen that they're going to have, I did the math. That's 20 pounds on average per defensive lineman gained since January. That's significant. So there's definitely a focus going on there. The other thing was the offensive line room. Every single one of them, 300 pounds, save for you have Kill Switch O'Connor, Killian, who was just under 300 pounds, and the incoming freshman, who was also just under that 300-pound range. So they're gearing up for the big conference. They know they had to emphasize size in the trenches, and you can definitely see that's what they're working on right now. As far as the roster itself, nothing really popped out. There's 19 combinations of players doubling up on numbers, but we'll talk about that more. And like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Eric covered it. Miller Moss, and the one other point was the high IQ level up the middle. When you've got Miller at quarterback and Jonah at center, you probably got a Mensa level IQ right there, and that is definitely going to help the offense out. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll see what happens today, at first day of spring camp. Looking forward to it.
Or we won't see what happens today. Yeah, no, look, I had the same reaction you guys did. It was, we knew from the offseason that Lincoln Riley was talking about a commitment to getting bigger and getting stronger, right? He said that, and so you expected that you would see some of that. I don't know that I expected you to have an average 20 pounds gained by a defensive line group in a few months. That's a lot. And so that shows both a real commitment to it and also raises a specter that those guys aren't as quick as they need to be, but we'll see. And it wasn't just a defensive line, as you guys pointed out. I mean, this is a much bigger team than USC was just a few years ago. And that's true on the O-line, that's true on the D-line, it's true on the edge positions. I mean, when you have freshmen like Cameron Fountain, who was listed at 6'6", 256 as a true freshman, that's a big dude, right? I mean, you can play edge rusher in the NFL at that size. It's not like he needs to develop for a few years to have a chance. So it's a big group. Now, and that's welcome, right? One of the things that frustrated USC fans over the last few years with Alex Grinch's defense is that it looked like the defensive front would get pushed around. And so you wondered why, if we're going to focus on being small and quick, you wonder why, well, why don't we see this quickness doing anything for us? Instead, we just see guys getting pushed around. So it was welcome. Although I would say this, if you're going to be average, it's better to be big and average than small and average. But size doesn't necessarily, it's not like in order to be an effective defensive lineman, you have to be really big. I mean, if you look at the best defensive linemen that we've seen over the last 20 years or so, Aaron Donald, 6'1", less than 300 pounds. You've got Warren Sapp, 6 foot, 6'1", less than 300 pounds. John Randall, 6'1", less than 300 pounds. At USC, arguably the best interior defensive lineman we've had in the last quarter century, Mike Patterson. There's some dispute on that, but no dispute that Patterson was great. Patterson may have been 6 feet tall, under 300 pounds. So the size is welcome because USC's been getting pushed around so much, but size isn't everything with defensive linemen. And some of the best guys you're going to see are guys who are smaller than the offensive linemen in front of them, but are very quick and very strong. So we'll see whether these big guys can move, because that's going to be important. That being said, USC has struggled getting pushed around defensively and in the offensive line for some years now. Even with the good lines that USC's had, it didn't look like they could move people so much as they could move and get around and seal people. This group of linemen these guys that will be true sophomores this year, these guys are big, right? These guys are all 316, 317, 333. Look at the weights. These are big dudes. And this is a good sign just because this is a group that USC is really going to have to rely on this year to play big minutes and maybe to anchor left tackle and some other positions. So the fact that these guys appear to be physically ready to do that is a pretty good sign and something to be excited about. And I'll pick up also on this business about Jonah Monheim at center. When it comes to everybody on the offensive line understanding what they're supposed to be doing, understanding assignments, that's primarily the center, right? This is the catcher, the quarterback, whatever you want to call it, of the offensive line. To have a guy who's not only an excellent football player, and Jonah Monheim's an excellent football player, but a guy with that level of experience who really understands this offense and understands defenses, that's going to be hugely important. I would anticipate, and this is not to denigrate last year's center, who I think was also a really smart guy. It's just that when you're talking about replacing your center, one of the things you worry about is, are we going to get the calls right? USC is going to get the calls right as long as Jonah Monheim is out there, and so that's pretty exciting, and I think that's something we should feel good about. Go ahead, Mark.
I wanted to add to what you're talking about with the center position that I failed to mention. Brett Nealon has been working with Jonah during the team's PRP. So as far as having another smart center and a guy who played the position really well, that's going to help Jonah make that transition, snapping the ball, getting that type of I don't know, mentorship from somebody who's played the position. So to me, that was really important. That was brought up, that Lincoln spoke about, and I think that's really important. So I just wanted to make sure I got that added in there.
Yep, I agree with that. Is there anything that we wanted to hear from Lincoln Riley that we didn't hear yesterday? Anything that was disappointing? Or anything that you wanted him to talk about, but you're pretty sure that he's not going to tell us?
I don't know, Eric, did you think he was a little more candid about the offensive line play, saying, look, we didn't reach our goals last year? And I'm not sure if he was specific about the interior offensive line, but Chris mentioned, how Justin had to move to the center spot, and that was because of the lack of competence they had at the tackle positions. And that's why Jonah moved out there. Remember, this was the plan last year. Jonah plays center. Well, they had to extend it one more year. So, Coach Riley said, hey, it was very mature on Jonah's part to come back for another year. The maturity factor was he was incentivized because his next position in the NFL is not going to be at tackle. It's going to be at center or one of the interior spots.
Yeah, we talked. Go ahead, Eric, please.
I don't know if there was anything that Lincoln needed to say or that he missed out on. They haven't done anything yet. There's going to be a lot of excitement about day one, and they're still not going to be in pads. That's sort of he's still saying. So what I did like, and again, I know you asked for what he didn't say. I liked when he was asked about leaders, right? Who are some guys stepping up? Who are leaders? I like that there's a couple things that he's done. He's stepped away from being the quarterback coach. And there's times where when a head coach sort of gives up his baby, right? If a defensive head coach stops calling plays, turns that over to somebody else. Lincoln Riley, a quarterback coach, he's no longer the quarterback coach officially. Luke Heward takes over that kind of designation, quarterback coach. It can go one of two ways, right? It's nice to see when a coach says, hey, I've got bigger things to do in terms of taking over my program. I need to be in more places. He's talked about, we want to give all the benefit of the doubt to the defense. If this is something where he's pulling away from that, I think that's really good. Sometimes you see, it starts to get away a little bit and he takes it right back, right? No, I'm calling plays now. I'm, like when things start to go bad a little bit, they go back to what they know. But I do think that this is a step in the right direction for him. And along those lines, he didn't rush out and say, oh yeah, team leaders are, it's Miller Moss, it's guys coming back, it's guys who have been here. I like that he said, we are in full-blown prove it mode. You have got to show me right now as this thing plays out that you're going to do it. We're not guessing anymore. We're not bringing in a veteran guy who's played somewhere else and just assuming, yeah, he's going to be the team captain. He's a guy who's done it before. Like, this has been a couple years now where you've had these transfer classes come in, and early on, it looks like, okay, that's going to be the guy. And then as the season plays out, you find more and more, okay, maybe he's not the guy that everyone expected of him. So again, I know you asked kind of for things he didn't say. I do think that that was maybe something he didn't say. He wasn't going to put somebody up there as, hey, this guy's a leader for this team. There's nothing that's been earned yet as far as pads on and playing and actually proving anything on the field. I thought that was a nice kind of pre-spring, motivational tactic or whatever it was from Lincoln. But I thought in not saying names, that was an interesting piece that he had there.
Yeah, the exact quote, Eric, was, if you've been here or just got here, prove it. We want the guys who are going to step up and do it right now. So, that's telling, hey, you might have been starting last year. Well, we saw what happened with Shane Lee after year one. And I'm not saying he wasn't a leader, but they were starting to kind of shuffle things around. All right, we need guys who are going to show it on the field, not just, be a part of the culture change. So yeah, Lincoln Riley is ready to take this program to the next step, to the next level. And what you were talking about, he's giving up his baby. He is not going to be the quarterback coach anymore. He's giving it to the inside receivers coach, who is now the quarterback coach, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like having a Heward teach quarterbacks is a strange thing, right? I mean, if you take away the Manning family, there seem to be more Hewards that have played quarterback than any other family other than the Mannings. But it is interesting. Look, he obviously thinks Luke Heward has something, because even if Heward is a natural quarterbacks coach, he wanted to have him on the staff when he wasn't ready to give up the quarterback coaching position. And all of us sort of asked, 2 receivers coaches? I mean, is it really that different what you're doing inside versus what you're doing outside? And the answer is it's not that different. But this is a guy he valued and wanted on staff. And it may very well be that Lincoln Riley had always anticipated that he'd give up that job at some point. And look, if you're going to be the head coach, it's hard to be laser focused on one guy on the field. And so I think that probably makes some sense. So I like that. I'm going to push back a little bit on this leaders comment, because I think there are 2 ways you can take it. The positive spin is the one that Eric has put on it. The other way of looking at it is there are no natural leaders on this football team. Look, the last 2 years, we knew who the primary leader of the USC football team was going to be, right? It was obvious. It was the best, most talented guy who was playing the most important position. So you knew from day one that Caleb Williams was going to be your leader. You're going to have other leaders, particularly on defense. And that first year, I think even Shane Lee was an obvious fit there, right? Because inside linebacker has historically been sort of the leader of the defense, calls the signals most of the time. And Lee was an experienced guy who was coming from the most successful program in college football. And so you would expect that a guy like that might bring over some of the work ethic and other and cultural things that you wanted. So it seemed easy that first year to know who the leaders were going to be. I would expect that Jonah Monheim is going to be a leader. I would expect that Miller Moss is probably going to be a leader. Although, look, guys, Miller Moss may not be the quarterback of this football team. We'll see. But Miller Moss has played 1 game. Jaden Maiava played an entire season and is bigger and maybe more talented. We'll see. I'm not claiming there's a quarterback controversy, but it is when you're talking about the leaders of a football team, ordinarily you look at the quarterback and it's natural to say, well, that guy's our leader. And I think Miller Moss is a leader on this football team. But Miller Moss is also a guy who doesn't have a ton of experience and has a pretty talented guy who's breathing down his neck. So I don't know what to make of that. And so the non-positive spin, which is the one I always choose just for fun, is that Lincoln Riley's looking at this football team saying, for the first time since I've been here, I don't know who our leaders are. And we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Is that too pessimistic?
No, because I had kind of jotted that down to talk about here too, just looking at the roster. So first of all, we didn't get into our numbers. There's a bunch of number changes, and I'm not going to go over all of them. A couple of the ones that stand out, Jalen Smith is going to go all the way down, and we're 1 on defense. Deuce Robinson finally gets the 2 that his name would seemingly demand, to where Woody Marks coming over as the running back, probably the starter there, wearing number 4. And then that was interesting. Mason Cobb keeps 13, not retired yet. For he gets to do the Mariano Rivera grandfather clause, number 42, as probably the last guy to wear 13 for a long time. But those are Mekhi Lemon going from 24 down to 6. He gets kind of his own number, so they don't have to throw on a bunch of the pullover jerseys anymore when he and Christian Pierce are wearing the same number last season. But
Kamari Ramsey's just going to slide right into Kalen Bullock's jersey and into
Kamari Ramsey, the UCLA transfer at safety, wearing 7. All the low numbers, it's doubled up, zeros, ones, twos, everything that's available down there. Guys are wearing, and then you had a couple guys go way up to Devin Tompkins from 37, which 37's a defensive line number. Had to kick that in, so he's at 98 now, and then Nate Clifton, the Vanderbilt transfer. He gets 99. So the numbers kind of, as you want to get out of that middle range, I guess. You want to either go as low as you can or as high as you can. And so had a bunch of guys jump into different jerseys this season.
By the way, Jacoby Lane is going to look a lot more like Wayne Jarrett this year. Not just in his number, in his size. I mean,
yeah, Jacoby Lane goes down to 8 from 89. But so the second point of that was, in looking at the roster, 15 players on this team from the 2020, 2021, and 2022 recruiting classes out of high school or junior college ranks to USC. 15 players right now of the 3 classes that should make up a huge bulk of your veteran leadership production. And most of those guys, look, you've got Jonah Monheim in there. You've got Miller Moss in there. Again, no production is one game, but it's guys, Jalen Smith is like your leading defensive guy in that group. Like, you do not, Anthony Beavers is in there, Kobe Pepe's in there, guys that, maybe they contribute late, but not a lot to fall back on in terms of, yeah, I've done this. I'm a 2-year starter coming back for a 3rd year. I'm a 3-year starter coming back for a 4th year. I've been a team captain before. Like, not a lot in terms of that, in terms of guys who have grown up through USC. And I know Lincoln Riley talks a lot about, we want to shift, right? And again, the 2023 class, this 2024 class coming in, there's a lot to like about those 2 classes. But that empty hole of that 2020, 2021, 2022 group, I think that's where you're seeing it show up in terms of there's not a lot to just fall back on in terms of, hey, these guys have been here for 4 years and they've all played a ton, and these are the clear leaders of the team. It's pretty few and far between in terms of guys where they can bring that sort of background to a leadership spot.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, people talk about how they don't want USC to be so reliant on the transfer portal, but look, the fact that you just pointed out, the small number of guys you have left over from those classes, that tells you what Lincoln Riley thought when he showed up on the USC campus, right? He showed up, he watched the practices for the bowl game, and what Lincoln Riley clearly concluded was, this is not a USC football team, right? It's not. And Lincoln and Riley had been at some OU teams that they didn't win a national title, but some pretty good football teams with guys that went on to play in the NFL. And they looked around and said, this is not a roster you can win with, and so we're going to do everything we can to turn it over immediately. But there are consequences to that. One of the consequences is that a lot of your natural leaders aren't there, right? That's where you would expect you to have guys who've been around a while, and there are a couple, but there aren't a lot. You know, that Michigan team last year that won the national title, they had, I think, 19 senior starters. They had 5 offensive linemen. Now, some of those guys were transfers, but a lot of them were homegrown. They had 5 fifth-year starting offensive linemen. I mean, it is a completely different model. When you have that, you have guys that know each other very well. You have guys that have worked together for a long time. USC, for the 3rd year in a row, is going to be in a position where they're trying to throw new pieces in and hoping it works. The first year it worked pretty well, particularly on offense, maybe not so much on defense. But we're trying it again, and the reason is because the recruiting before Lincoln Riley got to USC was not where USC needs to be. That's just the reality of it. So that does leave you in a position where you don't necessarily know who your leaders are going to be, and you're hoping that the pieces come together quickly, because with this schedule, they better come together quickly. You know, when talking about the numbers, look, 7 is a great number for a safety. I always think Mark Carrier when I see number 7 at USC, and obviously we've had some good safeties since then. What's interesting to me is USC has a bunch of retired numbers, but USC also has 2 numbers that are essentially retired, even though they are not hung up on the peristyle end of the Coliseum, right? You do not see guys wearing number 5, and these days you do not see guys wearing number 55, which is sort of interesting. I mean, obviously number 5 should be retired under USC's own criteria. But it's interesting to me that number 55, which is in some ways the most iconic of the USC numbers, just isn't in circulation anymore. And you wonder, is somebody gonna pull that out of retirement? If so, it better be somebody special. Or should we just stick that up in the Coliseum and not let anybody have it, because practically speaking, we don't? What do you think about that?
I'm of the opinion that 55 jersey, it has to be voted on by the guys who wore it before you. And they have to give you their approval that you've earned it. You've put some blood, some sweat, some tears into that practice field. You've shown the team that you're the leader. I don't know. At first, before the roster was released, I was wondering if they were holding it back. Are they going to use it, for NIL purposes? To maybe induce players. And I'm wondering, are these types of traditions going to be a casualty of the NIL transfer portal, window, the war on it? Are we going to have to kind of use that to get players that are worthy of that number to wear it? I don't know. It is interesting that it hasn't been in circulation for quite a while now.
What do you think, McKinney? Is 55 effectively retired at this point?
So I do like the idea of the guys who have worn 55 kind of coming together and giving it to somebody. But look, if anyone was gonna wear it, Easton Mascarenas Arnold seemed to fit that, right? Like, he wore 55 at Oregon State. That's clearly a number that he likes coming in. You assume he's a starter, potentially a team captain. I know we're talked about not getting out ahead of that at this point, but he's wearing 4, and I know you can always change, right? You can wear something in the spring and wear something else in the fall if you earn it. So I do like, right? I like a freshman who comes in, doesn't wear it, plays enough to where his sophomore year, junior year, those guys come out to a practice and, hey, you got 55. LSU has, I think, a couple numbers, right? 7 and 16, maybe the other one, where maybe it's 18, where depending on kind of your position and just how you fit within the team, that's a number that you can earn and wear. But they keep it going constantly. Guys are almost always in those jerseys. You're running the risk, I think, of 55 of sitting on the shelf for too long. And I don't want to say making it too precious, because it means a ton. I mean, it does mean a ton. But you're getting to a point where nobody can wear it, because you're never going to find someone who feels good enough to wear it. And I do think it's fun when it's on the field. I mean, this is one of those things, college football traditions are fun because you do them, right? If you had like the fourth quarter jump around in Madison and you're like, we're only going to do that for special games. So you didn't do it for a year and you didn't do it for another year. And then it becomes, well, what game do we do it for? Some of these things are like, let's get them out and let's make them important and make guys play up to the level that you need to play up to do those. So I like to have it in. Again, I don't look at this roster right now and go, oh yeah, this guy's an All-American candidate. We got to give him 55 right now. But you do want to get to a point where you have those guys rolling through and you have 55 out there, I think quite a bit. And I throw 42 in that mix. I throw 43 in that mix again. I think that if you are the best safety on the team, let's get some of those numbers out and get them going and make these guys play up to that level.
Yeah,
I'm wondering
but
I was going to say, I'm wondering if that late April transfer portal window will shed some light on it. Look, I'm just going to throw it out there, not to get anybody's hopes up, but over this past, last week, Michigan's new defensive line coach had a little trouble. We know that Michigan fans are concerned that the portal is just going to open up and they're going to see players leave. Maybe Mason Graham wants to come home for a year, play at USC before he heads to the NFL. 55 numbers waiting for him. Just throwing it out there.
yeah, look, the truth is, if you're going to put number 55 on right now, you are putting a ton of extra pressure on your shoulders, right? You can't, I mean, just imagine if Mason Cobb comes over last year, he was second team all Big 12. He's expected to be a major player, a starter and a key to that defense. Imagine if he put 55 on before last season. That would have been a huge weight to carry. And so I get why it's effectively retired at this point, but at some point USC has to have somebody come along that is equal to that number. And when we get that guy, the coaches need to tell him you have to wear it. You got to stick it. You're going into your junior year. You're going to be a first-round draft choice. You're a returning All-American. Put 55 on, and hopefully that will happen. Look, Mark also asked whether NIL is going to change the tradition of retiring jerseys the way USC has done it. I sure hope so. USC made a huge mistake in retiring those numbers. I mean, you can recognize those Heisman winners by, in lots of places you have a ring of honor or something where you put the names around the stadium. You can do that without retiring the numbers. I would like somebody to wear 32. I would like somebody to wear 33. I would absolutely like somebody to wear number 5. Not just anybody, right? It's got to be somebody special. Could I see Zachariah Branch taking number 5 his junior year at USC? I'd like to see it. I mean, I would like to see these numbers be used. And so I think it's a mistake to put the numbers out of circulation. It's especially a big mistake to put the numbers out of circulation when the reality is 42 and 55 absolutely are every bit as worthy of being retired as any of those Heisman numbers. They just are. And so if we're going to retire numbers, why limit it to Heisman winners? That's silly. 55 is the best and most consequential number we've worn at USC, I suspect, other than maybe 3. You can make an argument for 3. So I would like that tradition to change. I would like to put those numbers in circulation, but only in special circumstances. And we've seen what happens when maybe you pull it out. Remember, Mike Garrett was asked to give up his number for Darnell Bing, and he did it. And Darnell Bing was a really good football player. But I wonder whether he was retired jersey worthy. I don't know, right? I mean, because the bar is so high once you're going to do that. Anyway, any more thoughts?
And that's the tough thing about giving it to freshmen, right? Lamar Dawson came in wearing it. Like, that's why I like the idea of, like you said, no, this guy's going into his junior year. He's and that's when those jerseys get handed out instead of just a guess of hey, maybe this guy will end up being okay.
Right. Dylan Baxter wearing number 5 because he was a big time recruit, right? It would be, Whitney Lewis wearing number 3 because Keyshawn did. It would be silly. So You can't do it. But you know, these guys that wear the numbers for a couple of years, they become All-Americans in those numbers. They may not want to give them up anymore. And so practically speaking, 55 just doesn't get used at USC, which is a crime.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're saving number 5 for Rodney Sermon's kid when he eventually gets to USC. Perfect segue there for you.
I hope I know he is a big time recruit. I remember his father. Whether he is 5 worthy or not, I guess we'll see. I hope so. If USC brings in a running back that's 5 worthy, then we're all going to be very happy about that. We talked a little bit about position changes, at least in the one. I don't know if the one big position change with the move of Jonah Monheim to center. There are some other interesting positions listed on the roster. And Eric, I think you mentioned one in your article, Jalen Smith listed as a corner. And Jalen Smith hasn't been a corner at USC. Let's talk about position changes that maybe position changes you expect to see that we didn't see on the roster. Can you think of any? There any position changes you might have expected that didn't pop up, or anything that was reflected on the roster that was a surprise?
I don't know. To me, it seemed pretty straightforward. You know, they moved Mason to the weak side away from the middle. That kind of grabbed my attention a little bit. But other than that, not really. Nothing really popped out. As far as the Jalen Smith cornerback designation, I don't know. That was Eric mentioned in the article that, you know, that's how Danton likes to kind of categorize the nickel spot. But when they go to that 5 defensive back alignment, that nickel spot is kind of used as a linebacker position. So I guess we'll see how they use it, whatever we get to see in practice, and then eventually in the spring game.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the nickel position, right? I mean, you take in the old days, you take a linebacker out. Now it's sort of the base defense for most teams. But in the old days, you take a linebacker out and bring in maybe a safety. But in today's more wide open game, maybe the nickel really is more of an extra corner on the field. And if that's how Lynn sees that position, then you wonder who he's eyeballing for that position. I don't know that if you were simply lining up your guys and asking who is our third best cover guy, that's good. That's a guy I want to play at nickel. I don't know that that's Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith had a nice bowl game, but I don't know that that's him. And so one of the interesting questions is, how does Lynn see that nickel position? And if he sees that as a guy who's going to be up near the line of scrimmage and can be an enforcer, but still cover, then maybe it's a bigger guy. Maybe you're looking at Zion Branch. But if he sees that as this is a guy who has to be able to cover a slot receiver man to man, then I wonder who he's looking at. And I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Well, Jacoby Covington's the other guy backing him up right now. I think those are the only 2 that are actually slotted at the nickel spot. Eric, did you see something different?
No, I mean, look, rosters have gotten so generic right now. It just offensive line, defensive line. I mean, I'm surprised that they even designated between defensive line and defensive end. And I guess when you've got 2 different position coaches there, Sean Nua doing the ends, and Eric Henderson doing the defensive line, that's when you're going to do that. But so often it's just defensive back, and that's just the whole thing. And I do think that it's important to note that Dan Lynn talks about versatility, right? These guys, I mean, some of these guys in the secondary are going to play all 5 spots this spring. Like they're going to get looks all the way around. And I would suspect that Lynn can be pretty creative with that nickel spot. I mean, Eric Gentry is a guy that you could flex out there and have him flap those arms in passing lanes and be out there a little bit. I think Zion Branch is a guy that gives you maybe more of that third linebacker role. Jalen Smith's a guy that can go in there. I mean, Traquan Fagans is a guy that played there last year and can do that. I think you can do a lot with that spot, and that they're going to be so kind of pyramid building where that base is going to take so long to put in this spring that all those little mixing, matching things like that are probably down the road a little bit, I would assume, just in terms of, look, let's learn the language, right? Let's get all this stuff in And then you've got what I like about the secondary right now, there's a ton of everything back there. Like there's length, there's kind of physical ability, there's experience, there's really young talent. I mean, you can do a lot with all five positions right now. And there's a lot of guys who have played a lot. So I would not be surprised if we saw maybe a few different guys line up in some of those spots. But it does seem like he designates, I mean, whereas Alex Grinch, all the nickels were listed as safeties, and they worked with Alex Grinch with the safeties. This is going to be interesting. You've got Doug Belk as sort of the entire secondary coach, and then Dan Lynn sort of popping in a little bit there, just with his background is so kind of corner safety specific. But it seems like the nickels are listed on the roster at least as corners here. So I mean, it'll be kind of a lot to learn about how they specifically use that spot. I think Alex Johnson was the guy that ran mostly there at UCLA, 6'1", 190. He was listed at and looked. I mean, he looked like you'd expect a nickel look, that combination kind of safety corner, not really fitting in exactly at one spot, but he had a big time season at UCLA. I mean, I expect that nickel. Lincoln Riley's talked about even in the previous defense that nickel had to do a ton, and there was a lot on their plate. I'd expect the same thing for the nickel in this defense.
Yeah, the nickel has. I mean, when you go to a nickel, the reason you're doing it is because you need a guy who can do a lot of different things. It could be a playmaker for you. So if you're not getting production from that position, it's a problem. And I think Eric's right. When you look at this, defensive back room, you're looking at you should be able to find five guys that can play in that group, right? I mean, it would not surprise me if the secondary is the most improved position on the team this year. I think there's enough talent there. You had some fantastic transfers come in. Lynn is a secondary guy. Doug Belk is a fantastic secondary coach. I would expect that we're going to see dramatic improvement at that spot. We need to see it, right? Because the secondary struggled for years now. But I would be surprised if they don't find really good production out of that group. So much so that a guy like Zion Branch, who I think is immensely talented, may have a hard time getting on the field. And if a guy like Zion Branch has a hard time getting on the field, that's a good sign. Maybe not for Zion Branch, but it might be for the secondary. Okay, so spring practices start today. We won't be watching them. And so we're going to be relying on feedback from players and coaches primarily to get some information. We talked a little bit about what we would hope to see in past weeks in spring practice. I want to change it up just a little bit. Let's talk first about what we think the coaches want to see. And then I want to talk a little bit about what we think the coaches still won't know when spring practice is over. Because that's sort of the interesting thing. We always talk about what are we going to see? What are we going to know? But this is a completely new defensive staff. You've got a bunch of new players. The coaches are trying to understand what they have and what they don't have. And when spring practice is over, they're going to know some things. I suspect there's some things they won't know. So let's start with this. What do you think the coaches most want to see during this spring practice? The stuff they're keeping hidden from us, but it's not hidden from them. What do you think? Mark, start us off.
I think they want to see how quickly they can absorb the defensive installation that's going to be done slowly. And Lincoln Riley kind of clarified what he meant by they're going to do a slow install. And Eric touched on it a little bit. Make sure you understand the base defense, build the pyramid. Lincoln Riley used the metaphor analogy, you want to shoot for the moon, but if you miss by an inch, you're probably going to overshoot the moon by, thousands of miles. So they want to make sure that, when they call the defense, these guys know exactly where to go. It's just, they want to find the little things, identify your leadership, the guys on the field who are going to do things the right way, not just off the field, but when it's time to practice as well. Again, we don't get to see a whole lot. The first thing I'm going to note when I walk in through, through Marview Gate is who's working with Luke Heward with the special teams guys. I think we're assuming it's going to be new running backs coach Anthony Jones Jr. But first day of practice, what are you looking for? Who looks big? You know, who dedicated themselves to the weight room? Who looks like they're ready to contribute this year? First day of practice is, you know, it's eye-opening. What do we see? What do we want to look for? It's all questions. And we're just there to try and gather as many answers as possible. What the staff is going to look for, who's ready to bring it? You know, don't sing it anymore. Don't talk about it. Just go do it. Go prove it.
So before spring practice, you've got all these new coaches, all these new players. The coaches don't yet know what they have. If you're Lincoln Riley, Eric, when you walk out on practice that first day, and what is it that you most want to find out about your football team before this spring practice sessions are over?
So the first day is different. What I want to know by the end of spring is who gets it, right? I mean, that's the thing as a coach. Who can I trust? If I call something, who's standing there turning around, looking at people, who doesn't know what to do? Like the guys who by the end of spring, when you can send in a play or something shifts or something does whatever, and they're locked in and they get it, those are the guys. Those are the guys that you want to play with. I don't care kind of who can hit hardest and throw the most weight up in the weight room or whatever. The guys that can play fast, quick, get it, and go, those are the guys that you want to find by the end of spring. And I think when you have a new install, that really gets elevated. Again, I know the top, you know, we're going to go slow, we're going to do whatever, but you have to be fully fluent and running at a high speed by the end of spring. And I think that's big. That's going to be big for the coaches to figure out. You don't have to play a game at the end of spring. I know there's the spring game, whatever. That could not matter less for me in terms of, are you going to be actually ready to go when LSU comes calling, when the season starts there. So I think that's one of the big things of spring. I think you also have to get a sense of who are like your natural playmakers, who's around the ball all the time. This was something where 2 years ago, Mekhi Blackman's name came up, and he was okay at Colorado, right? When he came over, there was not a thought of, oh my gosh, this guy's never going to see the field. There was also not a thought of, this guy might be the best defensive player on the team and become a third round pick and a very good NFL player his first year. When spring ball starts and you hear his name constantly, hey, he's making plays constantly. He's all around the ball. He's got interceptions like every single practice. Those are the names that start to pop up a little bit too. This guy finds the ball. He's always there. He's always doing something. And so those are things that I think can pop up in spring too, where you want to have your ear to the ground. Just guys that find a way to be involved all the time. I think those are kind of those two things. How much tackling are they going to do? How much hitting? Where is that come natural? What you've missed for so long, just pursuit angles and understanding of, oh, if my guy is there, the guy with the ball is probably going to go this way and I need to be there. There's so many times where you've seen, like, I mean, first of all, to get two USC defenders anywhere near the ball has been like miraculous the last couple of years. But when they are there, there's been so little understanding of what the guy with the ball is going to do and anticipation of that. I think that becomes a key thing too. Who actually has that sort of innate ability to understand how to put themselves in position to make tackles. So it's, you know, there's a lot of different things, but I think you just want to get a general sense of who keeps rising to the top, who keeps making plays, who's around the ball all the time, and who do I not have to stop practice for constantly to explain what we're doing each step of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Chris, when you were playing football in high school and in college, who was that one coach that always stood out in your head, that voice that says, run it again, do it again, until you guys got it right? And it was always that one player the coach had to kind of look with the peripheral vision at and say, hey guys, I'll stop saying it once we get it right. Because that's what the slow install is all about right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with Mark in terms of two of the things that the coaches are absolutely looking for. I want to put a slightly different spin on one of them. the coaches do want to know who their playmakers are. They want to know, and certain guys have a knack of just making plays that nobody else would make, right? Troy Polamalu was an example of that. Junior Seau is an example of that. These are guys who make plays when you don't expect somebody to be able to make that play, right? Polamalu would make plays, including the NFL, and you just say, nobody expects the strong safety to do that. You can't, as an offense, you can't plan for that. Or you know, the big cat or Junior Seau, or guys who, just because they're physically dominant, can do things, and the offense is left saying, I'm not sure what I do about that, right? If you have Reggie White on the other side of the offense saying, I don't know how to solve that problem. Like, there's not a piece that I have that can do that. But the other way of looking at it is that you have guys who have these upsides. And the guys we're talking about are all great players that are going to play no matter what. But you also have players who have a tendency to make a lot of really special plays that the average player doesn't make, but also have a tendency to not be reliable play to play, because they're sometimes out of position. They sometimes, and I'm not going to name any names, USC's had some players in the recent past who would make some spectacular plays, but who you also couldn't count on to just bring a guy down in the secondary and not give up 50 yards, right? And so, and different coaches have different tolerances for that. There are coaches who are more risk averse, and they say, look, I know this guy's not going to make a lot of spectacular plays, but I know where he's going to be. I know he'll wrap up. I know I can rely on him to not lose the game for us. And you have coaches who say, yeah, but I've got to get a guy who's going to make plays for me. And yeah, he's going to make some mistakes, but he's going to run around and he's going to do some special things, knock a ball loose. And so that's another piece of understanding what you have. You need to know who your playmakers are. You also need to know who the guys are that will know their assignment and line up in the right place and not screw things up. And I guess the last piece, and I think this is, in this day and age, it's critical. Lincoln Riley knows that his roster right now is not identical to his roster in September. What he needs to figure out is, do I have some holes on this roster that I still haven't filled where I have to go find somebody? And I suspect everybody associated with the program believes that Elijah Page is going to be able to step in at that left tackle spot and play very, very well. I think that's the expectation, and he probably will. But if you're Lincoln Riley, you need to know, do I have a guy at that position who's going to keep Miller Moss on his feet? Because I cannot expect Miller Moss to just know there's somebody behind him and spin around and have an unblocked guy miss like I had for the last 3 years. And so because if you have a hole in the roster you haven't yet filled, you have to fill it in the transfer portal before September. So that's one. And I'm guessing the coaches have a handful of positions where they say, I don't know if we're okay here yet. And we need to find out over the next few weeks. And hopefully they will. Okay, let's go to a new topic. We spent a lot of time talking about the last recruiting class, which a lot of those guys are now on campus. On3, which is the who the WeAreSC.com website's affiliated with, came out with a new top 300 for 2026. So we're talking about kids who are going into their junior seasons. Just came out yesterday. Any thoughts on that? Anything jump out at you guys about that 2026 recruiting list that just came out?
How long it takes to get to a true California kid on it.
Thank you.
I think 2026 and committed to USC, right? So Brandon Lockhart, the Loyola corner. So it's what you want. You want those top California kids, but boy, is it loaded with Louisiana and Florida and Georgia and all those guys. Chris Henry is now at Mater Dei, and so he's going to be listed as a California guy. He's an Ohio guy, already committed to Ohio State. We'll see. I mean, he's a guy that you throw all in for. I think if you're USC, he's a special wide receiver. But that's what jumps out. Not, and we'll see how guys develop. 2026 is
ways
still
away.
quite a ways away. You can see those guys elevate, and what USC coaches I think have done. So when you're talking about these top 10, 15, 20 guys in these classes, they typically don't tend to drop down into the 200s, 300s, 400s, whatever you do as you go. Like these are guys that are coveted throughout their process. What USC coaches have done a good job of, and I think when we talked about kind of the weights going up, whereas guys, I mean, you get these guys that are seniors in high school and they're still just starting to get where they're going to be. Some of these guys are done. Some of the guys you're talking about in the top 20, this is what they're going to look like even 4 years from now because high school weight programs are what they are. I mean, they'll continue growing a bit, but you do want to get a lot of these guys that are still ascending as they get to USC, and those aren't guys that are going to show up necessarily right now in some of these lists. So, what I mean, again, what jumps out is that USC does not look like right now, a front runner for let's say 10 of the top 50 guys or even 5 of the top 50 guys. It's going to be a slog against Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan and all of those schools, Oklahoma, Texas, for a lot of these guys, and we're gonna see what USC's made of a little bit, I think, as they go to this Big Ten and what kind of momentum they can actually sort of launch forward with this coaching staff, with what everybody certainly hopes is a better defensive product on the field, because it's been 18 years that we've talked about, like, oh, they're going to get all these elite guys. They just have to play good defense, and it hasn't happened. So we'll see how much attention they can get. The last thing I want to do, when you do look at these top lists, it's full of guys who have talked about either setting up visits to USC or wanting to take visits to USC. So USC's in the air. The coaches are doing what they need to do and getting involved in a lot of these guys. We'll see sort of what that pull looks like when it comes time for, chopping lists down and doing all that stuff with recruiting. And then we'll see who shows up with the most cash at the end and signs them.
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I try and stay in my lane when it comes to the recruiting season. I'm having a tough enough time navigating and focusing on 2025, let alone guys that haven't even started their junior year of high school yet. So, yeah, the thing that I did notice, and Eric touched on it, you come to California to the West Coast if you want skill position players. The first top guy and I'm finger quoting this, on the West Coast that plays on the offensive or defensive side of the ball, he's in Arizona. And lo and behold, he's verbally committed to Oregon. Defensive lineman, 6'4", 285 pounds. But this guy is 2026. He's already, committed to Oregon. You don't see anybody in California. This is why USC is going across the country looking for linemen. So either On3 isn't evaluating the West Coast enough, or they just don't consider California or the West Coast, states as a place to go when you want offensive and defensive linemen. I guess we're in a down cycle, but you got to go all the way down to, I think that was the 18th or 19th best player in the top 300 just to get to a defensive lineman that's west of the Mississippi. To me, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there's a debate with USC fans about whether or not these recruiting services are fair to West Coast talent and California players. I don't know the answer to that, especially when it comes to offensive linemen, because offensive line is probably the hardest position to predict coming out of high school. What I do know is, as Eric pointed out, the guys who are in your top 20 on these lists, they might move around a little bit. But the guys that are in the top 20, they may not become the 20 best football players in college. But those guys have rare physical gifts. Those are almost always guys that you go to a camp, you watch a high school game, and they just jump out as a holy smokes. That guy is big, he's fast. And you think about USC's recent recruiting classes, if you have a Deuce Robinson or a Zachariah Branch, those guys jump off the screen when they're in high school. If you're at a camp, those guys are the guys that immediately your eyes go to because they have rare physical skills. That doesn't mean they'll end up being better than a Jacoby Lane, who was also very highly recruited, but not as high on the list as those guys. It's just that you can't watch a Zachariah Branch and say anything other than, holy cow, that guy is quick and fast and elusive and special, right? In the Pete Carroll days, you would look at the top 20, top 30 guys, and you would have USC as the favorite for, say, 4 of them or 5 of them. You just would. That's no longer the case. USC has become a national recruiting program. And if you're a national, more so than they were with Pete. Pete would pull players from other parts of the country, obviously. But the bulk of the team was made up from of California players. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case with Lincoln Riley. I don't think it's because Lincoln Riley has decided that he wants to make his job harder. I think Lincoln Riley looks at California high school football and says, we need to get the best guys here that we can. But if I'm not recruiting out of Georgia and Texas and the DC area, then I'm going to be in trouble. And that's a different situation than USC has been in before. You can still do very well as a national recruiting program. Notre Dame has had to do that forever. Ohio State is a national recruiting program. Yes, there are players in the Great Lakes states, but even there, Ohio State is competing with Michigan and Notre Dame for those guys. Ohio State's roster is filled with guys from warm weather states. And so you can recruit nationally, but if you're going to do that, you're going to be fighting with big dogs in their hometown, and you better be, one, very well coached, and you better be successful, because you're not going to pull a lot of guys out of the deep South if you have Alex Grinch running your defense and you lost 5 games. Now, if you're bringing Coach Henney with you, then that's a different story, right? Or if you're Lincoln Riley and you're talking to quarterbacks, different story. But USC is now Lincoln Riley's clearly decided USC has to recruit nationally in order to get where he wants to be. And that means that USC is going to be in big fights with programs that ordinarily you don't want to be fighting against for hometown kids. But that's where they are. And so I do think that means if USC is very successful on the field this year, if the defense turns things around and that staff stays together for another year, I think you're going to see a situation where you have a lot of guys from Georgia and Florida and Texas who are very interested in playing football for USC. But if USC struggles, if they fall out of the top 25, if they're not competitive in some of these games, then you're talking about trying to pull kids out of Georgia that have Georgia and Alabama and offering them big time programs very close to home, and you have a lot of teams offering them cash that USC is probably not going to have. So it increases the level of difficulty. If Lincoln Riley was a diver, the dives he has to attempt are more difficult than the dives that Pete Carroll had to attempt when it comes to recruiting, and that's just the way it is. Any other thoughts on that before we move on from recruiting stuff? I'm seeing no's. All right. One other question before we get to our we'll close with our 10 questions game. But I had one other question because there was a little bit of chatter this week about with Aaron Donald retiring, that maybe USC could lure him in as an analyst. I have no idea if there's any truth to that chatter. Probably nobody knows. Maybe Lincoln Riley doesn't even know. But it's a fun topic, so let's play around with it. Do we think there's any merit to it at all? And if so, what would you envision his role being? If you were Lincoln Riley and you were going to make a pitch to Aaron Donald to come in as an analyst, what would you tell him you want him to do? And how do you think that helps your program? What do you think?
Go first.
Yeah, so you have to make a call. You have to call him, right? I mean, you have to. If you don't, if it's the easiest decision that Lincoln Riley will ever have. And I think what you do is you just say, do you want to come in and be Aaron Donald for 1 day a week at practice? Just stand there and watch, right? Let recruits see you wearing an SC polo or a hat or a whatever. throw something out at a guy. I mean, he'd be in a spot where you probably couldn't do a lot of on-field coaching at practice or whatever. So just be out there. Come hang out, enjoy the weather. Don't show up if it rains. That's fine. Take a day, go to the beach. I mean, that's what it would be, right? You would pay him to be able to put the words Aaron Donald and USC in the same sentence for a year. And that is the help that he could provide for your defensive line. I'm sure there's stuff where he'd like to just sort of stay involved in the periphery of football. Now, if he said, "Hey, I want a full year, I want 2 years, I'm going to travel, I'm going to do nothing," yeah, that's fine. But you have to call him. You have to. He doesn't have to travel anywhere. He's right here. You just ask him, "Can you just come out when we've got recruits here?" And just stand there, let him take pictures with you. I mean, that's what it is. You want to equate great defensive football players to USC. And it's like when Ed Orgeron was going to Notre Dame and LSU and whatever, like there's certain personalities, certain players, certain people you just want affiliated with your brand because it resonates. Aaron Donald is absolutely one of those guys.
But sarcastically, I kind of feel responsible for this. I kind of read the tea leaves the day before he announced his retirement. I just posted on Twitter out there. He misses his former position coach, and he would do anything to join USC's coaching staff. Lo and behold, Eric Henderson is retweeting this, and he's got the open arms emoji. I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe there's something to this now. Scott Schrader jumps on the message board. Hey, you know what? There's a possibility. So look, it's a pipe dream. He probably wants to take a year off, but I can't imagine having him just join the staff, even as an unofficial analyst, hanging out in the defensive line position room. That wouldn't suck. And like Eric said, just recruits showing up and saying, "Who's that live dude over there that's going to be in the Hall of Fame?" That doesn't suck either. You could have him on your staff unofficially and have some booster just throwing him some perks here and there. Whatever we have to do to make it happen, yeah. Let's make sure Aaron Donald has his own cubicle inside the McKay Center somewhere sometime soon.
Yeah, look, I mean, when Lincoln Riley has those fancy dinners at his house over the summer,
Yeah.
and they bring in recruits, I want Aaron Donald there, and I want Lincoln Riley telling the recruits that this is the newest member of our staff. I'm with Eric. He's not going to be. I mean, I don't anticipate he's going to be grinding it out the way assistant coaches grind it out, right? He's not going to spend 80 hours watching film for Lincoln Riley. He doesn't have to. What you want from him is you want his association. You want him to meet recruits when they show up in LA. And it would be nice if from time to time off the field in meetings or other things, he's around and can give some pointers to some guys. Right? I mean, that if you can get that from him, then you're getting something of value. I agree with Eric. It's an absolute no-brainer to make the call. And I don't know what he wants to do with his life. Now, I read an article saying that he may want to be an actor, right? He may see the Dwayne Johnson career path as sort of what he wants to do. Well, if that's true, then he's probably going to be hanging around LA, and he'll probably have some free time that he can use to just hang around football. And look, I don't know Aaron Donald, obviously, but guys who have played football for a long time tend to love football. They tend to like hanging around football. They tend to like talking football. So who knows? I've thought this offseason that there are two no-brainer phone calls. That's one of the two. And the other one, you know where I'm going with this, I think. If I'm Lincoln Riley, absolute no-brainer to call Pete Carroll and see if I can get him around the program. Do I want to raise money for NIL? Yes. You know what I'd like? I'd like Pete Carroll every once in a while just shaking hands at some booster function and talking up the program. I'd also like a guy who is familiar enough with what's going on at the program that I can call his cell number and say, "Hey, Pete, what do you think about this?" Because there are only a few guys in the world who are probably in a better position than Pete Carroll to give you that sort of advice as a head coach that, you know what, you may think about doing this or you may think about doing that. And if you can get access to that, you do it. So I'm with you. I would absolutely try to get both of those guys associated with the program in some way, even if they're not sitting 60 hours on campus, which they're probably not going to be doing, even if you got lucky and could land them. Anything else, Mark? Since you started the rumor, do you want to make a prediction?
I predict he will be hanging out at practice on occasion. Similar, last year, Jalen Hurts made a cameo appearance, and I swear to God, every single Philadelphia Eagles fan tuned in to USC to see Jalen Hurts walk through a door. That's the effect that Aaron Donald can have. It just brings the attention back to USC. And the recruits notice this. That would be the biggest effect.
Yeah, I would think that even if he's hanging around in LA, he wants to do acting, he enjoys the LA lifestyle. If he's around, you get him out there from time to time, you put an SC shirt on him, and that's probably something that Coach Henney can pull off in light of their relationship. But yeah, it'd be great to have more from him. Okay, anything else we want to say before we start our game, guys? Okay. It's our 10 questions game. As always, everything's on the line. Not money, not career advancement, just pride. And when it comes to Eric McKinney and Mark Holkin, nothing is more important than their pride and their honor. So that's what we're fighting for, guys. And I'm going to remind you, because you seem to forget this, that there is one referee and one judge in this game. And complaining about the rules, complaining about the questions probably is going to help you. You can do what you want. It's your game. You can approach it however you want. But I just got to tell you, I see a lot of guys losing points unnecessarily through the course of these games, okay? So let's just be careful with that, all right? Are you ready to go?
Right.
Okay. Question number 1. If you had Phil Knight money, what recruit's house are you going to right now with a big bag of cash? Start us off, Eric.
So for the game, Chris Arledge's house, right? That's where I'm going right off the bat.
As an analyst, you want to bring in Pete Carroll, Aaron Donald, and Chris Arledge?
That's exactly it. So for the question, 2025 defensive lineman, you could go kind of any way you want. Elijah Griffin right at the top, number 4 overall prospect, defensive lineman out of Georgia, looking hard at Georgia, but has talked enough about USC where I think Phil Knight money could get you there. I don't think you need all the money that exists. I think just one person's bank account could potentially get you there. But again, I talk all the time, build inside out, front to back. So right up there in the middle of the defensive line for me.
Mark Holkin, where are you going with your big bag of cash?
Yeah, I'm going to have, since Eric took Elijah Griffin, I'm going to just stay in the state of Georgia. And since we can't buy the entire state of Georgia, I'll take the other potential next Sean Cody at USC. Give me Justice Terry. Throw him the bag, start there, work your way out.
I like it. Now, what's interesting about that is that both of you guys went with high school players and good ones, rather than trying to fill a hole on the existing roster through the transfer portal. So I don't know if that's because you assumed that in the question or just because you guys believe in high school recruiting more than you believe in the portal. But
I think I saw recruit. I immediately went to high school. I think if it was player, I would have gone as a portal choice.
Okay. I liked both answers. They were both, and I also obviously am going to go defensive line for that. So 1-1. You both get a point. Congratulations. Feel good about yourselves. Question number 2. If OJ hadn't run into legal problems, maybe you've heard about that. He ran into some legal problems at one point. Would he, Marcus Allen, or Ronnie Lott be the most recognizable face of USC football? Mark Holkin.
I went back and forth on this one, and then it came down to, and I have to go with OJ, and it's because of all of those movies he made after his football career ended. Those Love Boat cameo appearances, the commercials, Hertz Rent-A-Car, Monday Night Football Report, Sideline Report. If OJ did not get in trouble with knives, he might be one of the greatest, not just athletes to ever come to USC, one of the greatest personalities to ever grace this earth. I mean, he was that popular.
Yep. Okay, Eric McKinney, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have to go back and forth on this at all. It's OJ. It's not close. I mean, it's not close.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, you see these days, obviously USC has a lot of very famous, very successful alumni. I think Marcus and Ronnie are the guys that when you see them on the field, it's like, okay, that's the face of USC football. Two NFL Hall of Famers, you know, Marcus Allen, Heisman Trophy winner, Ronnie Lott, arguably the best safety that ever lived. But yeah, look, OJ was bigger than those guys, and the primary reason OJ is bigger than those guys is because he played Officer Nordberg, and it was. I'm gonna make this argument, and some people might disagree with me. I think it was the best acting job of any USC alum in history. Nordberg. I mean, he had to play that character in The Naked Gun. If you don't know who I'm talking about, and you haven't seen The Naked Gun, you're wrong. Go watch it right now. But look, that was a role that required real depth. I don't know that Anthony Hopkins could have pulled that role off, and OJ did. So if the answer is OJ, you're both right. So you both get another point. It's 2-2, and we're not seeing any separation yet. But I think we're going to see some now. Yeah. Number 3, Eric McKinney, what song should the Spirit of Troy drop from the rotation?
So none, and I'm embarrassed for you that you're asking this question.
Okay.
Ooh, a little derogatory there.
It was. That was personal. That was a personal attack. Mark Colkin, are you also going to engage in a personal attack?
No, I went through their entire repertoire and I found one that I can deal without.
Which one?
Brooklyn. Get rid of it. I bet you half the USC fans wouldn't even know they were listening to it. Chris, do you know Brooklyn when you hear it?
No, but I'll tell you the one I was thinking is the Pat Benatar song that we've been doing for the last 40 years. It's a good song. That's
a derogatory look. I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, well, you both lose a point. 1-1. 1-1. We'll move on to they look. Heartbreaker. I mean, I don't. Here's the thing. There are some songs that transition well from pop or rock to marching band, and that one transitions pretty well. Okay, but that song is not that great a song that 40 years later you should still be doing it. It isn't that good. It's not. It's just not. They're wrong to keep doing it. They should stop. That's my position. And because I'm in charge, you guys both lost a point. 1-1. Going into question number 4. Who's the best freshman football player in USC football history? Mark Holkin.
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I don't think there's a wrong answer. So
no, there's a wrong answer, and it's an easy question.
If you say Whitney Lewis, you lose the game.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be a wrong answer, but I'm going to go with Charles White.
Charles White. Okay. Eric McKinney?
The answer is Mike Williams. And if you ask me who the best sophomore player is, I'd probably say Mike Williams. I might say he's the best junior player, even though he never played his junior season. Mike Williams is the best freshman player at USC.
I dinged Mike Williams because of that Kansas State game.
81 catches, 1,265 yards, 14 touchdowns as a true freshman.
He dropped too many passes against Kansas State.
First of all, Mark is right about the Kansas State debacle. That was a very difficult game to watch, and I watched it in Manhattan live, and it was not fun. And if you ever tried to get out of Manhattan after the game, it takes like 7 days. You have to do some of it in a covered wagon. It's awful. That being said, Eric McKinney's right. It was Mike Williams. Mike Williams, the last 2/3 of that season, was not only the best freshman USC's ever had, he was as good as any receiver USC's ever had as a true freshman and could dominate a game physically from the wideout position. Just unbelievable. The answer is Mike Williams. If you weren't around to watch that, if you're a new USC fan, you're probably listening to this saying, Mike Williams, he was an NFL bust. What are you talking about? No. Mike Williams was unbelievable in college. Unbelievable. Mike Williams may have been a better football player than Reggie Bush. Okay. He may have been. He was unbelievable. I know. That's why I said maybe. But unbelievable, that guy. Just a monster. Okay. 2-1 McKinney. Question number 5. Wedding Crashers or The Hangover? Eric.
So I think maybe it comes down to the Will Ferrell against Mike Tyson sort of cameo-ish of this. And I'm gonna go with USC. I'm gonna go with Will Ferrell and Wedding Crashers over it.
Mark Holken.
Yeah, look, I admit it, I've never seen the entire movie Wedding Crashers. I've watched.
-1 point.
No. You cannot deny Mr. Chow. I'm sorry. Mr. Chow might be one of the greatest characters ever created in cinematic history.
There's a reason I chose these 2 movies. I think these are the 2 best comedies of the last 25 years. That's not why you're losing a point. You're not losing a point because you love Mr. Chow. Who was that guy? He was so mean. No, you're not losing because of that. You're losing because you've never seen all of Wedding Crashers, which is ridiculous for a man of your age, Mark. Please. It's 3-0. 3-0 McKinney. It's turning into a blowout. All right, look.
Yeah, that's the point. Wow.
Get your act together. Get your act together. Question number 6. What's the strangest fan base in college football? Who's weird? Come on, give it to me. Mark, go ahead.
I think Oregon and Iowa fans were separated at birth. I'm gonna lean towards Iowa fan right now.
Iowa fan is the weirdest, okay? Eric McKinney.
So, I mean, I know it's always going to get a point here. Oklahoma fans, just because we've had so much back and forth, it's wild. I do want to give kind of a special shout out. Nobody has more weirder things than Texas A&M. Every time some video comes out of something going on at Texas A&M, Trev Alberts just had his kind of introductory press conference and everyone's, waving back and forth. The yell leader things in the overalls and it's honestly, if you lined up a bunch of Texas A&M videos and just random internet stuff, I would not be able to pick which one is which. It's wild coming out of there.
That is the right answer, by the way. It's A&M, and yes, Oregon, Iowa, Oklahoma fans. There are a lot of fan bases that are questionable, and you wonder about their intelligence. You wonder whether any of them actually attended the school they root for, and if so, how they managed to stay enrolled. But Texas A&M is weird. They are super weird. And if I were, first of all, I wouldn't go anywhere near a Texas A&M event. I wouldn't do it because I don't trust them. But if I did, and there were like Kool-Aid containers all around, I would call the authorities because I would be concerned that they're going to go Jim Jones on us. It's a strange cult in that place. Also, probably the biggest underachieving football program in college football history. I mean, they have every single advantage you would want to have, and they still manage to suck almost all the time. And I think it's probably because they're so weird. I mean, I think once you get there, you just look around and say, "What in the? Am I on planet Earth, or did I fall into another dimension? These people are crazy," and I think that ruins their football program. Because they recruit well, they have a lot of money, they have all that stuff, and the guys that seem to perform well there, the Johnny Manziel types, these guys are so unstable, they can't possibly make it more than a year before they fall apart. So the answer is yes, Texas A&M. It's now 4-0 McKinney, and this is feeling very much like a blowout, but we'll see what happens. We still got some questions left.
I'm feeling like Bob Stoops in 55-19 right now. It's like Eric knew everything that was coming.
Yeah, except even Stoops managed to score first. This is, I don't know what to say, but we're just going to look. I feel like the announcers in a blowout football game where they're trying to come up with things to talk about just to keep the audience interested, and I know I'm failing, but I'm doing my best. All right, here we go. Next question. What's the next big evolution on the field in college football? McKinney, why don't you start us off?
All right. I don't want to suggest that your job here, but I don't know if I'm going to get this right on the nose. because technically it's on the field, but it's also off the field. I think like load management for players, we've seen already go from 14 to 16 in the playoff. It'll get to 20 or whatever and whatever. The Jordan Travis injury came against North Alabama. I think we're going to start to see potentially guys taking days off, not playing full games, figuring out how to get these guys all the way through the season. I know it's not anything in terms of play calls or equipment or whatever, but I think potentially, and then let's face it, if they become employees, they can take vacation days, right? I mean, all that stuff is in there. So I think figuring out kind of on those games that you can win, can you sit a guy? Who do you have to play? How do you have to do this to get all of these games that you hope to play? That workload's going to go up a lot when you start adding on all these different levels of playoff game.
Okay, very interesting answer. I didn't expect that. McKinney tells us there's a day coming when coach will say, look, our quarterback is on vacation this week, so we'll see what we can do. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Eric's answer just killed college football in the future, if that's the direction it's going.
Should I take a point away from him for that?
You're the judge. I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, well, yeah, he'll lose a point. I don't want anybody to kill college football. All right, go ahead. Give me your answer.
Now, on the field, I think what we're going to see, look, they're already moving towards the NFL model. So let's just rip off the Band-Aid, get it over with. Move in the hash marks, get the size of the football the same as the ones they use in the NFL. Do your extra points from where they kick off, where they practice them in the NFL. Just get there. If that's what you want to look like, get in there, do your cosmetic surgery, make it happen. Come out looking better than ever. Let's just stop pretending that college is different from the pro game, because it's not anymore. Eric just said it.
So Mark wants us to have, Mark wants us to have 2 feet inbounds to make a catch. Maybe you're right on that, but I'm not going to give you an extra point because that'd be a 2-point swing. I already took 1 point away from Eric at your suggestion. It's now 3-0 going into question number 8. Why don't we just get rid of kickers and punters? Wouldn't the game be better? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, if you do that, then we're going to eliminate the Zachariah Branches of the world.
He can't play receiver, Mark? Is that what you're saying?
You're going to remove some of his stats. You're going to take away his touchdown returns. You want to do that? I don't.
So Mark is pro kicker, pro punter. Eric McKinney, are you pro kicker and pro punter?
Look, when we would play in the cul-de-sac, you threw it off, right? Nobody kicked. Nobody kicked it off. You threw it off, right?
Yep.
And you had to have a skill guy do that. You had to throw it. Whoever could throw the farthest, you could throw it into somebody's backyard, and there was you negated the return.
Yep.
I like kickers and punters for the sole reason that coaches can make dumb decisions constantly because of that. I love going forward on fourth. I like the some of these. There's so many different football leagues now. I love the onside kick is like a 4th and 14, whatever league rolled that in, where you can just go for that to keep possession or not. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm kickers, punters. That's fine. They don't need to be there. Everything we can go for 2. We can go on 4th down. Love it.
All right. Now, while I would hate to give Dan Lanning a lifeline, I do think the right answer is that there are no kickers and punters anymore. Returns are fine, but they're taking away the return game anyway. They're changing the rules to make it harder to get returns because they don't want people to get hurt. And let's be honest, it's absurd that a game played, a physical, tough game where people are bleeding and where you're getting beat up and you're getting injured, comes down to whether a soccer player can kick a ball. Doesn't make any sense. It's never made any sense. So the answer is yes, we should get rid of kickers and punters. Nobody gets a point. It's still 3-0. All right, here we go. You can send Charlie Weiss to be the head coach of any college football program for the next 10 years, and they can't fire him. Where do you send him? Eric McKinney.
Notre Dame. You send him back to Notre Dame with everything we all know about it and everything all the Notre Dame fans know about him. You put him right back there.
Mark Culkin, where are you sending him?
I've seen that movie before. I want to see Charlie Weiss in Westwood for the next 10 years. I want to double the pleasure.
Here's the thing. UCLA is fully capable of hiring a coach at some point worse than Charlie Weiss because they're UCLA. And I want Charlie Weiss in a cold weather situation, where his face gets really cold and he can't feel it anymore, and so the snot just runs down his face. That's not going to happen in Westwood. He'll be able to feel it. He'll blow his nose. And that's my favorite part about Charlie Weiss is the snot face. So I think, yes, the answer is he needs to be at Notre Dame for 10 more years. That would make me happy, 4-0. What change would most improve the food and drink situation at the Coliseum? Mark Culkin?
Look, since I have no chance of winning this game, I'm going.
You don't know that.
No,
This
I'm
game is
going
unpredictable.
I don't like the way you called the game. Kick me out if you want. But how would I improve the situation? Lower the cost of everything. Geez, have you seen the price of a beer that they sell in a can? When I'm walking to the press box, I look over and I say, $18 for a tall boy. $18 for a can of beer.
Mark Culkin's not a fan of the inflation. Eric McKinney, what would you do to change the food and drink situation for the better?
Look, I gotta tell you, I wrote down 5 words: charge half price for it. That's it. I mean, it is. I always look at that and I think, wouldn't you make as much or more selling 3 times the amount for people doing it? And I get, right, you don't every single dollar beer night. I think, what was the team that just tried, was it in Baltimore that tried dollar hot dog night and it like fell apart? I mean, like, people are animals clearly at all of these things, but if you want to improve the situation, the stuff there, I'm sure, is fine. It's so expensive to take a family of 4 or 5 or just a couple people to go to a game. It's $200 to eat and drink at a sporting event.
$18 for a Modelo is just highway robbery. I'm sorry, it just is.
I think the Falcon, right? Didn't the Falcons do something where they had very low concession stand prices and just kind of run of the mill stuff, hot dog, soda, nachos, whatever, and did really well? I think that's, but you asked me about on-field evolution. This is my hope, right? That it's in the concession stands and we can figure this out.
Yeah, there's no question that the prices are absurd. I'm not sure that the quality of the food is what I would want it to be, but I can deal with that. The prices are too high. Although I don't necessarily want them to go to a $1 beer night, because I think that would change the experience in the stands. And it's one thing if you're sitting in the press box, but I'm a man of the people. I sit with the people, not like you guys. And I don't know that I want to sit there if it's dollar beer night. Okay. Both of you get a point. It's 5-1 going into the last bonus question. And this is a 5-point question, Mark, which is why don't tell me that the game's not winnable. Don't tell me that.
I wanted to
You can't win the game in the first quarter.
I wanted to kick dirt. I wanted to kick dirt on the home plate. I was in the mood.
Okay, well, I mean, I want there to be some suspense. So it's a 5-point question, and you weren't disqualified, although most people watching this think you should have been and think I'm too lenient, which is my reputation. All right, here we go. Bonus question. What was the best sitcom of the 1980s? Eric McKinney, go.
Look, so if we're going on the one that I sort of think about and go back to, I like Cheers. I like Cheers for all the spin-offs of it. I like the Sam Malone character. You get a lot of, Sam and Diane, that kind of thing, just things that have become kind of vernacular and things that everybody knows about. That's what I'm going to go with.
Cheers. Okay. Mark Culkin.
Great choice, because that was my runner-up. But the answer is Married with Children. Al Bundy, high school football player, cannot forget he was a high school football player. You had the hot daughter, you had the sarcastic son, you had the mom that, everybody loved to look at, and the humor. It was just straightforward, in your face. You couldn't get away with it today. And it was so funny because there was so much reality embedded in the humor. And look, you go to work, you come home, your wife treats you like crap, your kids treat you like crap, the dog ignores you. It was reality, but it was funny. And I felt like, you know what? That's the house I grew up in. I could relate to that.
You're Bud Bundy. That will be your nickname from now
Yes,
on this program. Okay, so here's the thing. If you would have asked me this a year ago, I would have said Family Ties because that was my favorite show when I was a kid. But I saw an episode of Family Ties recently, horrific, like unwatchable. I was stunned how bad it was. I clearly didn't know anything about it as a kid. I think the answer is in fact Cheers, although both are great answers. But I think the answer is Cheers. I think that there's something about the depth of those characters and staying power that that I think puts it over the top. Even though I did love Married with Children. So Eric McKinney, 5 points. The final score today, 10-1. This was you're going to drop in the polls. You're going to drop in the polls after this, but that's all right. There's always next week. And look, sometimes John McKay took a beat down from the Irish and it changed his approach to football. So you're going to go back to the drawing board. You're going to come back next week. You're going to be a bigger, stronger, better Mark Holkin. And I think we're all excited to see it. Any final parting shots, guys?
Yeah, do better next.
Spring ball.
Good. I didn't want any final parting shots. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, fight on, everybody.